For centuries, to the millions of people living within its borders, Rome felt entirely permanent. It was an inevitable reality of the ancient world. Generations were born, lived, and died, with Roman power appearing as constant as the sunrise. The sheer physical footprint of the empire reinforced that permanence. The Roman legions carved vast networks of stone roads across continents, linking territories that stretched farther than most ancient minds could even comprehend. Over time, that overwhelming physical dominance produced a highly effective psychological weapon. By continuously expanding and crushing opposition, Rome created a powerful myth of absolute invincibility, systematically convincing its future enemies that attempting to resist was entirely futile. When a civilization instills that level of total certainty in the minds of its adversaries, it rarely needs to deploy actual troops. Fear and reputation secure the borders before a single sword is drawn. But look beneath the surface, and a different story begins to emerge. This chart visualizes a critical fracture in the Roman system. While territorial expansion eventually stalled, the financial burden of maintaining the military continued to climb exponentially. The immense scale of the empire, once its greatest asset, evolved into a severe liability. Maintaining control meant stretching out those increasingly expensive military resources thin across thousands of miles of hostile frontier. From a distance, however, these systemic vulnerabilities were practically invisible. To a common citizen or a foreign ruler looking in, the daily functions of the state continued uninterrupted. The cities bustled with commerce, and the armies still marched on command. The stability of the entire system relied on these symbols remaining unchallenged. As long as the imperial banners flew high, the fragile reality underneath was protected. This creates a dangerous tension. When an empire relies heavily on an illusion to deter threats, any sudden event that reveals its actual limited capabilities risks tearing the entire system apart. In the year 378 AD, near the city of Adrianople, reality violently broke through the Roman illusion. On that battlefield, an organized Roman shield wall buckled and broke under the assault of Gothic armies. For generations, Roman forces had routinely crushed foreign uprisings. When the army marched to Adrianople, both citizens and adversaries expected another predictable demonstration of military superiority. Instead, the Roman army suffered a catastrophic slaughter. Thousands of elite soldiers perished on the field, and in the chaos of the rout, Emperor Valens himself was killed. Word of the defeat stunned the empire. Minor skirmishes and setbacks were normal, but the total annihilation of an imperial army, along with a sitting emperor, exposed a terrifying, fatal weakness. A frightening question suddenly took hold across the provinces. What if the power of Rome actually had limits? What if the system could be beaten? The moment that possibility entered the public consciousness, the geopolitical landscape shifted. Surrounding tribes realized they could win, and lifelong allies recognized they might not be protected. The destruction of an imperial army shattered the myth of Roman invincibility. For the first time in centuries, the world saw that the giant could bleed, and that realization changed the psychology of the ancient world forever. 3 decades later, in 410 AD, the absolute worst-case scenario materialized. Alaric and his Visigoth forces reached the walls of Rome itself, broke through the gates, and forced their way in. The city had not experienced a foreign army inside its walls for 800 years. When news of the sack spread across the territory, it was met with total, paralyzing disbelief. This was a direct, fatal strike to Rome's foundational identity as the unconquerable conqueror. The heart of the empire had been exposed, proving that the heart of the ancient world was vulnerable. By breaching the city, the Visigoths stripped away the psychological shield that had protected the empire for 8 centuries. Symbolic destruction proved more damaging than the loss of any single territory. In the aftermath of the sack, the mindset of the Roman public shifted severely. Deep, pervasive doubt regarding the empire's future survival replaced the old assumption of permanence. This diagram illustrates exactly how dangerous doubt can be. A loss of public confidence creates an accelerating feedback loop. It immediately amplifies the damage caused by economic instability, which fuels further political unrest,
circling back to erode confidence even more. The empire still commanded hundreds of thousands of troops, levied vast amounts of taxes, and administered a massive territory. But without a bedrock of certainty to stabilize the populace, those resources became incredibly difficult to mobilize effectively. When widespread vulnerability becomes an accepted, visible fact, an empire loses its grip. Enemies press harder, local leaders hoard resources, and the downward spiral accelerates until it becomes entirely impossible to arrest. By the year 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire formally collapsed, marking the official end of ancient history's greatest superpower. But that date on the calendar was largely a delayed formality. The political apparatus had simply caught up with a reality that had been established decades earlier. Civilizations do not persist through military strength alone. Borders are held together by collective belief, projective confidence, and the unshakable legitimacy of their institutions. The loss of certainty marked the end of the Roman era. This pattern of a superpower believing its dominance is part of the natural order would reappear centuries later with the British Empire, which would eventually meet this same discovery. No amount of global trade or naval power can sustain a myth that has already died.